Hey, Sassy Stuff. I'm Molly, and this week, Georgia's not here. Emma. She's going to be helping with gymnastics this week on all things. Georgia is out of town, but don't forget to come back next week because Georgia's actually going to do her own solo episode just for you guys. We always want to start off with our gymnast of the week, and this week I selected Gabby Gladio from Alabama. Alabama had a great weekend. It was probably one of their first great weekends in a while, but Gabby is an amazing gymnast. She competes on all 4 events. She had 2 season highs, and actually one of her season highs is how they tied their meet. She hopped up on beam. She had a season high of a 990. That was the final event that they literally needed. They competed beam and floor last. They literally needed her to get up there and do it. And she just was so good under pressure. She had her season high or career high on floor with a 9975. That means she barely fumbled in football aspects. Like there was no misstep. It was just a perfect routine almost. They probably got her on some miscellaneous odd toe point somewhere. But anyways, she is a very high scoring all around gymnast. That's really hard to find, especially as a junior. A lot of times in college gymnastics, by the time, you're through 2 or 3 seasons, you really start to kind of only compete 1 or 2 events. Being an all-arounder as a junior is already something to be really proud of. She's an all-American gymnast, and I have to be honest, her floor routine is probably one of the best floor routines that Alabama has. It is so fun. Her coach definitely choreographed it just for her. Her personality is fun. I really love watching it. The music is such a good mix. And also just in general, her tumbling passes are difficult. Like for a junior, she's still competing really difficult routines. Emma, did you get to watch her at all this weekend?
Yes, I like Georgia. I am an Alabama fan, so I always cheer on the Crimson Tide, and she was phenomenal. Alabama obviously hasn't been playing the best, especially in conference play, but this was a good game for them. They had their season high team score, they had their season best on uneven bars and on the floor exercise. So, I mean, later in the season, they seemed to really be finding a rhythm, and she was absolutely phenomenal. But for Arkansas, they put up a strong fight, but they really just couldn't hold off Alabama's season best performance. And you can never guess when those are coming. And tonight it was Alabama's night. And, that makes me happy, especially after Alabama dropped the ball in basketball the other day to Tennessee. I was like, okay, come on, girls.
It's weird because Arkansas, like me and Georgia talk about this all the time. It's such a bizarre team. And I think the fact that Alabama wasn't even at home. Normally the Razorbacks do so well at home. They upset Florida there. I believe they upset LSU there as well. They were knocking out the top 3 teams. And then you turn around and somebody that is like on par with their skill level, like Alabama, they can't seem to be. It was an extremely close meet. I do want to shout out 197.650 to 197.450. They were 0.20 tenths from beating them. It was like crazy close. And really, I mean, Gabby's really the reason that they tied up that meet in the first place. I mean, she got up there, she was strong, she was confident, and clean, safe routines. They're going to win you the meet always, per the Stick It movie.
Well, with Alabama, too, they won 5 event titles, and Arkansas didn't claim any. So to me, that shows me that they're strong across the board because they still had a great score at the end of the day, but they do lack that standout individual performance in this particular meet. So that's kind of where they faltered for me.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, Coach Johnston from Alabama, I love her quote. She says, "I'm really proud of the team tonight. They fought and worked so incredibly hard to be able to come out here and just be their average. It was just exciting to see them translate all their work in the gym out on this competition floor and put a lot of those puzzle pieces together to create what was a really beautiful masterpiece tonight. So many individual breakthroughs. I think the most important thing was the fire in their soul that continues to ignite. And a night like this reminds you of all that work, all the failures, the losses, the hard moments along the way are absolutely part of every story, and they lead to breakthroughs in the highest of highs when you get to see those things pay off." I want to say like you mentioned conference meets earlier, Alabama is not doing so hot to the point where it's going to be really, really hard for them to make the conference championships at this point. For them to possibly even have a spot at that competition, they would have to keep the same rhythm up literally the next 4 meets. I mean, they have time. They've got some time. It's possible. Do I think it's going to happen? Yikes.
Definitely not. But that's just our opinion. They absolutely, if they are peaking at the right time, if they can keep up this incredible what they did at this meet and continue it through the rest of theirs, then maybe. But they'd have to be perfect, and that's really hard to do.
It's so hard to do, and so especially coming off of such an odd season, I think maybe this was their high that they needed to get them through. So I'm going to remain hopeful for them just in the next few coming meets, and I'm sure Georgia's going to have a lot more to say on that next week because she loves those Bama girls.
As do I. As do I.
I want to follow up on the Florida Missouri meet. Wow, Florida has had a comeback. The fact that just a week ago, they had 2 major injuries that we thought were going to knock them out of the rest of the season, if we're being honest. We thought that they were going to have to bring up some rookies. That was pretty fearful. I even said on last week's episode, the future for them is pretty unknown at this time. However, Selena Harris Miranda, she closed out the meet with a perfect 10 on vault. That is insane. That is her 5th perfect 10 in her collegiate career on vault. To be able to perform a vault at that level of difficulty and continue to score a 10 5 times. I believe Selena is a junior. So she's averaging more than 110 a year. That's insane. Can she do it again next week? I hope so. We've got some good meets coming up, but great week for Florida. Anya and Sloan were back from their injuries. That's so exciting. I'm happy that, they were able to come back and help Florida secure a win against Missouri, but Missouri had a season high in this meet, which I was shocked by because they still lost by 2 points. So it was a really big gap, which also can tell you what a par, Florida is setting. I mean, they came out with a season high, Selena Harris Miranda's killing it. The girls are back from their injuries. Thank God. And then you have Missouri who scored a season high, but still lost 2 points down. That's a really big gap.
Yeah, it is. But they have their season high across multiple events. They proved they can go toe to toe with the nation's best. So their depth and consistency are making them a real threat in the SEC. Will it be enough this year? I personally don't think so. But what I'm looking at with Florida is they are a national title contender. They have the highest score in the country and multiple gymnasts posting some of the best all-around performances nationwide. I always love Florida across the board in sports because I love the chomp that they do. I wish in Bama we could do something cool, but we'd have to be like an elephant. But I love the chomp with Florida. So I always love seeing them compete and seeing their team pride there. So they're showing that they're a real national contender here. So I'm excited to see as we get further along how close they can keep it with some of these bigger teams like LSU and OU. So I'm excited to see how that works out.
Yeah, I mean, they've kind of been juggling, their top 3 in the SEC conference, their top 5 nationwide. They've really been juggling that, though. I mean, they've obviously had a couple upsets throughout the year. They've had some injuries, they haven't had their best year. In my opinion, I think that they could have done better so far. However, they're really a team of grit. They're holding their own. They're showing up even through the injuries. They're still fighting. So I think Florida, like you said, they are a contender for the national championship. I think they're a contender for the SEC championship, for being honest. I firmly believe they will be there against either Oklahoma or LSU. I think those are going to be those top 2 teams, which I think are ridiculously talented teams. So I think Florida's really going to have to bring their all. And they're not going to be able to get rattled. That is something that is a problem with the Florida gymnasts is they do get rattled. I mean, when one person falls on beam, the next 3 do. And so I think, they're going to have to be able to be strong and sturdy on their routines coming up in the future. LSU competed against George Washington. Is this a conference play? Absolutely not. However, LSU had their season high, which was crazy. I just want to point out that they scored over 199 points. they were quite literally tenths away from having a perfect all-around score as a team. Um, LSU collected all 5 trophies. They came in and they just destroyed George Washington. George Washington lost with over a 2.5 point gap. That we've talked about this so many times. That is such a huge loss in the gymnastics world. We're talking like multiple falls on beam, incomplete routines. You had to have done a really bad job, in my opinion, to lose with over a 2 point gap. Obviously, these are two teams. One is not clearly not in the SEC. However, these are two teams that have a very different caliber of talent. We've got LSU with ex-Olympians. We've got, they have the seniority, if we're being honest. They've got an amazing team full of veterans. And so I do think that there could be a little bit of uneven play there. However, you're a D1 collegiate gymnast. That is crazy that there's over a 2.5 point gap.
Yeah, absolutely. And the cool thing about this for LSU is, in this sport, it's more individual and then you group your scores together for teams. So they're not like directly battling against the other team in a way that you would do in like a football or a basketball game where upsets can happen in that way. Or if you win big, it's like, okay, well, they're not that great to begin with. But seeing the scores from these girls, they've hit the 198 mark for the third time this season. Multiple gymnasts scored a 9.9 across all events. LSU has depth to challenge any team in the country. They are hitting their stride at the absolute right time. This is such a fun team to watch. So, OU and Florida really have to look out for LSU. I think LSU can really make a push to win it all in the end. This is a very exciting team and very exciting for the team that this happened.
Well, this is where I'm still, I wanted to point out Oklahoma remains number one. However, LSU has beat them. LSU is their season high of a score is higher by 0.5 point than Oklahoma's. Yes, are they pretty close together? Absolutely. But and I'm not an LSU fan. I still am a believer that I think LSU should have that number one slot, just in my opinion, just because of the way that they show up. They've upset Oklahoma. They're currently scoring higher on each event. Once again, I don't understand the rankings. I don't know the stats on that. I could be 100% wrong, and that's fine. But just from my opinion, watching these two teams, I think LSU kind of shows up and shows out every single time that they're at a meet.
They're so much fun to watch. I agree with you, but like any sport, they all have their own way to rank them, and people are going to agree and disagree. But the whole point is they just got to go out there and win on the day, and they'll take home the prize. And that is, it doesn't really matter what the rankings are. Go out there, perform your best, and win. And so I think LSU has every advantage to doing that, and they are just so fun and so dominant and just so exciting to watch.
All right, we are a show about the SEC. However, I just have to shout this out because this was literally historic. History was made. Sometimes it upsets me because we've got teams like UNC Chapel Hill that have amazing gymnastics programs. Yes, they are in the ACC. Are they ranked as high as some of these SEC teams? No. However, Bree Clark becomes the very first collegiate gymnast to compete the Biles, like Simone Biles, her move, on floor. She is a Clemson gymnast. It was done perfectly. Like, I would have thought that little Simone Biles was competing that. Almost nobody competes that, even on the national level or the Olympic level. So the fact that we've got a Clemson Tiger performing it is crazy to me. And this is why I like collegiate gymnastics, is because normally women hit their peak right before gymnastics or right before college. And it's fun to watch them because, they hit their peak between 15, 17, then they go to college and they kind of just have fun with it. Then they retire. This is so fun because you're watching a gymnast competing a super high difficulty routine. She's competing one of the hardest passes on floor, and she's in college. She's literally in college when she's supposed to be like getting ready to retire. I loved it. It was historic. I am such a fan of this girl. Bree, you killed it. If I could shout you out, just come on over to the SEC. Let's come on in. We're welcoming you here.
Start the Texas team for Molly.
Yeah, I'm gonna fund it. I'm gonna win the lottery and fund the Texas gymnastics team, and she's number one on my list.
I love it.
Well, thank you guys so much for checking in with us. Obviously, we love having Emma here. She is a fun little guest to be on here. She knows a little bit more about gymnastics than Georgia does. However, doesn't know as much, as some of the others do. So we are so happy to have you here, but we are awfully excited to watch Georgia take this on her own next week. So catch Georgia here next week and make sure to follow us and subscribe.